the breeze. Topic number one says, are African Americans the colonizers too? Very interesting question. Are African Americans the colonizers too? This takes us to a tweet from Donnie that says black people are colonizers now, and he has the crying face emoji. So this is a very short clip. I'll play it twice so that we could fully get it.
Black people also wear a uniform and get on a plane and come to our countries and kill us. You vote the same fucking melanated fucking people into government that sign papers to kill us. I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to hear it. You are our colonizers. I do not want to fucking hear it. I don't want to hear it. I'm done. Black people also wear a uniform and get on a plane and come to our countries and kill us. You vote the same fucking melanated fucking people into government that sign papers to kill us. I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to hear it. You are our colonizers. I do not want to fucking hear it. I don't want to hear it. I'm done. Black people also wear a uniform and get on a plane and come to our countries and kill us. You vote the same fucking melanated fucking people into government that sign papers to kill us. I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't want to hear it. You are our colonizers. I do not want to fucking hear it. I don't want to hear it.
So I had to play it a few times. Let's see if there's more to it because it's such a short clip. I guess Donnie posts something else. He says, good night. He says, black people really live 24/7 y'all heads. Y'all will call us every name in the book. Y'all will throw us in at the forefront of any discourse. And y'all always be the first ones to indulge in anti-blackness when it fits your narrative. Black people, really the blueprint. For some reason, he posts a white guy doing some bullshit dancing here. But our black folks, the colonizers too. Takru Tori asked a question. I was wondering, where is she from? Like, who is this person? Where is she from? Earlier he said not colonizers, but historical victims and beneficiaries of imperialism. Trigger Happy 262 is out there saying peace, peace. He says the person who made this video, is she currently residing in her country to make this strict dichotomy? I also think she isn't keeping in mind other arguments. So this is an interesting one. I've had this conversation a while back when Oni, myself, the Hashari podcast and the Matron, when we used to do Twitter spaces, we had a space one evening, and a black American made the comment himself about how, you know, a lot of these shitty deals that are made in the continent, in the Congo, whatnot, are often facilitated by black Americans. I recently had to tell someone, you don't find, you know, African soldiers killed in America. You will find black American soldiers killed in Africa, which is interesting. But are African Americans the colonizers too? I had never really thought about this except in some arguments about Liberia, but I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts as well. Let me start with Buana. Buana, what say you?
Koku, that is an extremely difficult question to answer, and I don't want to be offensive to anyone, but just for the continuity of the show's sake, I will try to do my best to answer this question. African Americans, in some regards, are colonizers. Well, they are working on at the behest of colonizers. Do they feel, or do they put themselves in a position of colonizers? Some do. Some do. And if you look at the scenario historically, up to this point right now, you could make that argument, because when people was to think back, there was this group called the Buffalo Soldiers. The Buffalo Soldiers is who Bob Marley sang about, by the way. You know, they were working on behalf of the United States government in clearing territory, Western territory in the Americas, in terms of killing Indians and destroying Indians. Not only that, you have scenarios where you see Liberia, some native Liberians would suggest that African Americans, when they came there with ideas of the Western mindset or Westernized mindset, and they attempted to enforce those principles on the native peoples of the world, not necessarily work alongside them. So some would say, well, their actions was consistent with colonization, American colonization, but just with a different face. And then you have instances where you have Grenada, where not only when they invaded Grenada, not only did white servicemen, military servicemen from the Americas invade Grenada, but also black servicemen as well. They invaded that black country. Not only there, they invaded Haiti as well in 1915. They don't only send white military Americans to invade and try to enforce the principles of Americanism. They also send blackface African people. This is why in Vietnam, the Viet Cong was trying to tell the African Americans who was fighting on the side of the Americans, this is not your war. Black man, go home. So this is a very, very difficult discussion. Even today, you have a gentleman, his name is General Michael Langley. General Michael Langley is said to go in with the use of AFRICOM, going into Africa and undermining African governments. They use black faces. Well, the American government, when it comes to nations of color or black nations, they use black faces to do these kinds of things. They use black faces of people to do these kinds of things. So when you see a person like General Michael Langley, he is not going there to fix Africa. He is going there on behalf of American interests, which is by and large white interests. So that could be perceived as colonial. But there are some people who are what do you call it? UIs. That's people who don't necessarily know. They're just ignorant and they just going out to receive a paycheck. Useful idiots. They just acted on behalf of their countries or their government, thinking that they're being patriotic, but really you are doing some certain things that's very colonial to the native peoples of other in the black world. You are doing things that's untoward, and because you're not political, people use you as useful idiots all around the world. You proud to adorn the American military uniform, not understanding what you are actively doing. I used to like James Bond. But James Bond is a character who is an agent of the United Kingdom's government, and his thing is to promote UK or the United Kingdom's interests throughout the world. So if you want to, they was clamoring for. I remember they was clamoring for Idris Elba to become the new 007. But to say that Idris Elba is a new 007 is Idris Elba would have to be a British blackface colonizer. So you have to really get into understanding what it is that blackface people are being used to do throughout the world. And that's the question you must ask. And some people are innocently doing it, some people are ignorantly doing it, and some people are very intentional in the things that they do. Very intentional, man. But I would say for the people who are doing it intentionally and they know the politics behind what they are doing, I say that they are African American colonizers, for the African Americans who are actively doing that. And it's not only African American colonizers, it's other kinds of colonizers, because I consider the people who fight, black folks who fight in the British Army, who carrying across British interests across the world, they are colonizers as well. It's a sticky argument. Very sticky argument, bro. Very sticky argument. But I'm curious to know how other people would feel about it. I'll stop right there.
I appreciate that, Buhana. Let me just read some comments in the chat, because there's something I think we need to kind of get to. In the chat, Trigger262 Plus says, we all need to be careful on the Liberian talk. I don't think anyone on the panel should talk about it unless there's thorough research on the topic, because it's much more complex than we make it. See, this is why I don't even bring it up anymore, but this is why someone like Trigger Happy then should come on. If you feel that we're not researching enough, then you should come on the panel and enlighten us a bit, but I won't even push that. In the chat, the pro-black perspective that's only says those are pro-Liberian rhetoric. Liberia is a straightforward case of settler colonialism. He only goes on to say, UNIA member went and saw firsthand African Americans were enslaving natives, which was my understanding as well. But okay. Trick Happy says to Oni, if that's the case, I'm not sure we can say Liberia touches Israel. I've seen some make the comparison, but I want to do research to consider the pro-Liberian side. Oni replies, it's not Israel, but it's settler colonialism. So I want to throw it to Oni, and I have a few questions for Oni. First, Oni, do you know where this woman in the video is from?
Yeah, I'm gonna guess she's Palestinian. I'm not sure, but I think this video surfaced during the whole, basically because Kamala was because Biden stepped down. The Democrats kind of pushed for let's distance ourselves from this Palestine stuff and drive a wedge between Black people and or African Americans and Palestinians. Basically in order that Kamala could secure the election, that kind of stuff. So I think she might be Palestinian, and who knows, she could be from Langley Halls as well. Langley, as well. Just picking a fight with, trying to drive the division. But I don't know. I can't tell. I mean, obviously, because for some reason, I don't know if people notice, but Arabs and Latinos look the same, and I think it's because they're both like historically, mixed people. But I don't know.
Appreciate that, Oni. So, Oni, you heard what Buana had to say, and you see what the chat is saying. What are your thoughts on this overall idea of Black Americans or African Americans are colonizers too? What say you to it?
All right, so I would say, I think that's the trouble with. That's why I said, it's in order to analyze things, you really got to distance yourself from, for what it's worth, African Americans. No disrespect, but what I mean is that it does cloud up your reasoning, because one thing I could say is this: there's three groups that if you say, if they're like, oh man, the world hates me, everybody's jealous of me, and I'm the best and I'm the greatest and blah blah blah, right? There's three groups that come to mind when you say that, right? Obviously the small hats, right? Obviously the white Americans, the Americans generally, and of course the African Americans, right? But one of the things that when you're in this school of thought that African Americans tend to propagate, it's this idea that they're the victims, they're the intersectional, they're the and like I said, the small hats do it too, right? But they're the intersectional victims. They're different. The world hates them, blah, blah, blah. And if you get into Black consciousness, African consciousness in that way, you kind of say, you know what? But they're the wronged party here. And of course, African Americans are generally not as wealthy as white Americans, right? But they're still the most wealthy Black group on the planet. You know what I mean? But I'll say it this way. What makes a people a colonizer, right? Now, of course, I don't go into the name calling to say one person's a colonizer, one person isn't. But what makes a people a colonizer, right? Is it that they are boots on the ground in a foreign country, right? All of them. Because if it's 100% of them boots on the ground in a foreign country, no, African Americans are not 100% boots on the ground in foreign countries. However, neither are white Americans. Right? The truth is that there's nothing that white America, if you think white Americans are colonizers, there's really nothing that white Americans do that black Americans don't. And as far as like military participation is concerned, black Americans participate more. Right? Why do they? Who freaking knows? You know, like who freaking knows? I don't know. But I could tell you, in fact, I'll tell you guys a story of this brother. You know, I used to organize back in Brooklyn, right? And this brother tells me when he was like, he's from Trinidad, right? And so I don't know if it was in order to get citizenship or some shit, but he ended up in the U.S. military. And what happened in the U.S. military was they asked him, they said, would you be willing to invade Trinidad, right? If American, if the military duty calls for it, and he told them no. And so they dismissed him. Okay, they said, okay, well, you can't be in this military, right? Basically, what that tells me is this. Now, of course, not literally, but what this tells me is that they asked that question of every freaking black American, and every black American says yes. You understand? Because what his reasoning was, no, I'm not going to invade a black country. Now, of course, I'm not saying you should invade a Arab country or whatever country, under the banner of America, right? But that's the truth. And again, it's not just black Americans, obviously, because like I said, I have a relative who, he's obviously Jamaican or something, right? And he was in the U.S. military, and yes, absolutely, he wanted to go to Iraq to kill terrorists. In his own words. Now, are these people terrorists when you go into their country and they're resisting your invasion? No. But his mindset was, yes, I got to go over the other part of the world and kill these people. Is he a colonizer? So I would say, I think that one of the things that we tend to do is we tend to say, we try to give excuses for what people are voluntarily doing. Obviously not every black American is doing this, but then again, not every white American is doing it either. But if I were in the position of this lady, let's say if I'm in Palestine, or let's say I'm in Somalia, or let's say I'm in Nigeria, or I'm say wherever, right? And I look at black faces doing what the American government is telling it to do, right? Then absolutely, I'm going to take the position of, well, these people are not necessarily like hands clean innocent. Now, maybe the vast majority living in the hood or what have you might be, but then again, when we talk about, well, what other thing do quote unquote colonizers do? And that's, reap the benefit, reap the reward, right? And of course, America is consistently putting up blackface when it comes to, like who does what vote, where does what, who's the judge in this situation, who's that, who's the military advisor, who's this, who's that, in Africa and black places and the overall, I would say, look, your complexion is not the end all be all. Not all skin folk are kinfolk. And I think the question really, it comes down to, well, what about, like for instance, the police? You look at a police officer. Is he not a police officer because he's black? Come on. So I think, obviously you can't go by 100% or universal, but I do think that, that's pretty much my view on that.
I appreciate that, Oni. Yeah, there's some interesting conversations in the chat going on. Trigger Happy 262 plus. I think the issue with the whole topic too, there is settler colonialism, internal colonialism, and exploitative colonialism or extractive colonialism. Black people are not settlers, but experience internal colonialism. Takru says.
Yeah.
Takru says, Trigger Happy 262 is cooking. By the way, shout out to Real Black Gentleman who said, y'all not going to say the only black people who went to Liberia were African Americans. That's not what's being said. But I think Oni makes a good point about something. A colonizer never meant everyone had to go and settle and colonize. In fact, why don't I look up the definition? It says a country that sends settlers to a place and establishes political control over it. So that leads me, I know Buana wanted to add something, but let me ask this question and Buana could add his point to it. How do you define, or how should we define colonialism, period? Buana, go ahead.
No, I think Trigger Happy did make some distinctions when he gave the nuances of colonialism, but when he says that black people have not been settlers, well, how do you describe the country of Liberia? The country of Liberia was settler colonialism, brother. That was settler colonialism, and it is right when RBG says that you can't only pin, and we're not trying to do that RBG at all, but you can't only pin what happened historically on the on African Americans, because there were Caribbean people within that faction who went back to Liberia. But I would also add as well, when Haiti was invaded by the United States of America in 1915, um, a lot of Black Americans stayed there for a very long time, very long time, to ensure that Constitution was enforced. So I don't know if you want to put a time on how long a person was to stay in the area to call it settler colonialism or not. But I think that there is instances where Black people have been settlers. I would consider them to be settlers in Haiti in 1915 and what they did, and also in Liberia. I mean, that is just a historical fact, but I can't get around it. I wish I could, but RBG is right. RBG is right. I wouldn't only pin that historically on just African Americans. You had a contingency of Caribbean people who went to Liberia as well. So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, only same question to you. How do you define it, colonialism overall? I know you spoke about it, but how would you succinctly define it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So, the thing is this. America's a settler colonialist project, and like Buana was saying, the Buffalo Soldiers, right, were just taking over the freaking Native American land. Obviously, like it goes back to this quote by Carter G. Woodson, where he says the eighth wonder of the world. The eighth wonder of the world is how are African Americans so docile? And he's like, people from Europe, people from all over the world go to the United States to study why in the world, like how in the world did the white American make African be that docile? No disrespect, right? Obviously, right? But what I'm saying is that it really doesn't make any sense why they were. I mean, it does make sense. It's like, all right, this is what you have to do to survive. But then it also becomes, well, sometimes, you either sometimes you have to I don't even know. I guess it's kind of like we just got integrated into the project and it's now, I think what it is that America is such a large country that we kind of inflate the importance and relevance of African Americans, right? In the sense of maybe proportionally African Americans are maybe the same as the Black population in, let's say, Venezuela. But for some reason, because Venezuela is not that large, I guess, I don't know. Although it is pretty big, but because it's not that large, and the it's like nobody really cares. But that's kind of how it should be, generally. But because African Americans are such a huge population, 40 million, they completely outnumber every almost every other group in the Western world, right? Because of that, we kind of put some more importance to them. But realistically, it's this is a group that, for the most part, I mean, it's hard to say. It's hard to give a whole broad brush because, again, there are isolated areas of Black Americans who have nothing to do with white Americans. Then there's also groups of let's say isolated groups of African Americans who are just dick riding, you know what I mean? like white dick riding, you know what I mean? I think so. Sorry, as far as the colonization question is concerned, like it seems like America is a colonizer, and at least at this point in time today, Black Americans are like in quasi partnership with white Americans, or like very supportive of white Americans. You know, and I think what this lady is saying, because again, one thing that we always know, like we all know, is that African Americans have a disproportionate participation in the U.S. military, right? So whereas they might be like, let's say 14% of the population, you know, this was like, you know, they say 20 years ago, right? 40% of the population, they might be 20% of the United States soldiers, right? Now, of course, you know, we tend to look at it as, well, it's a good financial opportunity, it's a good economic opportunity. Sure, right? But okay, like you're still flying across the world and, you know, terrorizing people for the American agenda, you know? So it's like, and again, you know, if they aren't flying across the world terrorizing people for the American agenda, some of them are, you know, terrorizing people across the street or being terrorized by people who look like them. So it's really like it really is that I think African Americans are in a pretty bad position. And I think that, but I think that you can't, like, I think that at this point in time, with the access to, like at this point in time, with the access to wealth that African Americans have, versus, you know, any other time in American history, I think you really can't, like the excuses that would have worked 40 years ago just don't apply, you know? So if America is a colonizer, and if you are in fact, you know, America's bed buddy, you know what I mean? Like yeah, you're a colonizer too. You know? There's just no ways around it. And I think this lady, you know, because like I said, I think she might be Palestinian. Like American, like Black Americans supporting the Israeli flag are pretty common. You know, it's not even like it's not like social media will tell you, you know. And I think that's the outrage that this lady is going at. But yeah, yeah. So I do think I do think that it would just kind of be, it's just kind of awkward to say, oh yeah, this white American is and this Black American isn't. And because, you know, this Black American is being forced to do it, because it's like maybe you could say that 60 years ago, but with how integration has progressed, it really seems apparent that, you know, Black people don't have a separate political agenda from white America.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you said just now. I just want to make this clear too. This is not a shit post, because this is not about shitting on Black Americans, by the way. What this is really about is recognizing that you're a participant in these colonial projects. Whether you want to call yourself a colonizer or not, you are a participant. And the idea that, because I think it was Takru who brought it up, that is a socioeconomics thing. Hey man, like Oni just said, in this day and age, you got options to not go. If Muhammad Ali could have taken the L and not gone, right? He said no Viet Cong ever called him the N-word. You can do the same thing too. And I think it's time, you know, I think it was Buana who mentioned it when he first started coming around Shoot the Breeze. He said a lot of this stuff is our participation. And all I want to say for this prompt is we got to stop participating. And we got to identify when we are participant or not. Marcus Garvey's always said only pale-faced colonizers. And I get that. But if you are working with the colonizer, just like if you're working with thieves, you become a thief too. You know, if you're working with murderers, you go down for murder too. So we got to be just honest about it. And again, this is not a shit post. This is just more so wake up. You know, when you're out here riding hard with this American flag, you are riding hard with the foreign principle, but with foreign activities of America as well. And that tends to turn people off, especially Black folks in other parts of the world who are affected by what America has done worldwide, right? So I just want to make that very clear. This is not downing Black folks. This is just to say, hey, let's not participate in that project whatsoever, especially directly in that way. With that said, and I'll try to read more comments if I can. But with that said, let's welcome in our boy, Real Black Gentleman, RBG. How are you this week? Unmute your mic, brother, if you're talking.
Hey, yeah, I'm good. You know, and just along with this topic, you know what I'm saying? Let's just keep it clear, this whole like colonization thing, right? You know, what was it? You have you know, a whole bunch of the British, and when the British and all the you know, European powers went into Africa during their colonies, they built up whole troops made up of Black people, like the West African Expeditionary Force, or you know what I'm saying, all these forces that the colonial powers did to, like, they gather them up and move them intercontinental. Let's slow down with this whole like, well, Black people's like the only Black people under a white flag that done, you know what I'm saying? You can look at it, a lot of the I'm sure it could be documented during the First or maybe Second World War, just like they had the Tuskegee Airmen in the United States. I'm sure a lot of other countries had their own little relative colonial white connection, had troops fighting and bombing, and you know, so let's slow it down a touch and broaden the perspective just a little bit. That's all I'm going to say. Now, it don't make it right. You know what I'm saying? In hindsight, and naturally, you know, it's not good for African people if we want to have an African that is as African as we want to be. To even like, we got to naturally precipitously decline from that. And yeah, even though the United States is the biggest country with as far as, you know what I'm saying, army, and that, yeah, there are a lot of Black people in that army, like, it's not going to be like that forever. You know what I'm saying? And you know what I'm saying? I would say that if you know what I'm saying? I would say trying to, you know, go back to motherfucking the boxer, my bad, Muhammad Ali. He clearly, you know what I'm saying, famous entertainer and all that, actor. He was like, no, I'm not fighting this white man's war. And there's a lot of that streak in Black America. We're clearly like, no, man, I'm not fighting this bullshit. That is not like a minor thing. Even though, yeah, there's a lot of Black people, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Make sure when you hear that, you in your mind, like, make sure, how Black is these people? Is they Black, or is they Blackish? Like, you know, it is what it is. Like, don't let this woman with this crooked septum ring in her nose. You know what I'm saying? That could be a fake little magnetic anything. I wouldn't give any credence to what she said. Why? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I wouldn't even brought this up to discussion. Not from her perspective, because we out here having tension about, you know, our Black people colonizers, and they go in an army. I mean, when you put in perspective, yeah, a lot of other Black people went into a lot of other Black people's countries, so to speak, and see, that's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna mute the mic.
I appreciate
RBG.
that.
Yeah, RBG. I don't think that. See, we was just trying to answer the question. Okay, the question specifically asks, is are Black American colonizers? And I said, let me defend myself. I said some. Just as what you say is true too. Some Black people in Africa, they gone into Africa and fight with colonial armies. That is a fact, especially the French. A lot of Black French, a lot of Blacks, you know, they went into Senegal especially. They had a military force of Black contingency, a Black military, where they used to go and subjugate other Black people. That is a historical fact. And also there are Black people represented in other westernized colonial armies. That's why I said some. I would never say all. So just as you have some folks who would do a particular thing in one instance, in one part of the world, you would have that going on in other parts of the world. But I think that the question asked is, are African Americans colonizers too? But if they was to even broaden this question, say, are African people sometimes colonizers? I would say absolutely. Two things can be true. You know what I mean? But we ain't attacking by no means all African Americans. We attacking the actions of some people who have intent to subjugate other people, and they don't have a geographical they ain't specific to one geographical location. They could be in America, they could be in England, they could be in France, they could even be on the continent itself. So I just was specifically answering this question, and I just said some people, because not everyone is one thing. So I don't want you to believe that we are attacking African Americans, by no means. If the question was changed a little bit and broadened, we would have examples for everybody else as well. So whoever put this prompt up, I don't know what their intention was,
Yeah. Look, actually, I forgot to mention before RBG came up. Shout out to RBG, by the way. But before RBG came up, I was thinking there was this. I think it was Martin Delaney. Martin Delaney went to Africa, and he said he gave one of the most interesting observations on the continent, which was that when the ships arrived in Africa, but for the people that don't know, Martin Delaney was active during the enslavement of African people in America, right? So he said when the ships went to Africa, when they reached the coast, the entire staff was African, down to the, from the captain to the, whatever. And that was because, Europeans couldn't stand the sun or what have you. And I think when I looked into it when I was younger, I learned that there was a certain ethnic group that was able to navigate the rivers pretty well. So like, let's say historically before, the Ma'afa, right? African, Africa used to trade with each other, down, from the top of the river to the bottom of the river. And there were a certain ethnic group that would, be the navigators, if you will, right? And the way how the story of this ethnic group goes is that this is the only ethnic group in West Africa that was never enslaved, right? Because they were pretty much responsible for transporting Africans from the interior of Africa into the into the coast, right? And of course, like I said, the people who were operating the ships in the coast were African people too. Long story short, I think one of the reasons why I would say, yeah, African Americans are colonizers is to say that you have to pay attention that historically what ruined us were collaborators. Okay? And if we are of the mind, hey, you know what? We either have an excuse to be collaborators, or we aren't collaborators at all, right? We are we're going to make the same mistake that our ancestors did, right? Because honestly, if in fact, Martin Delaney observed this. He said, if Africans, right, on the continent stopped collaborating, the slave trade would end. Okay? The slave trade would not continue without collaboration from, and I tell you, that same brother I told you about from Trinidad, he was a cool brother. He would tell me, look, if you look at African American neighborhoods, right, how when the police siren comes on, or when the police are chasing somebody, kind of everybody cooperates with the police. We get out of the way when the police car is coming through. And of course, if the policeman says he wants to run through our gate in order to catch a suspect, we open the gate for him. The idea is that even to this day, we are still collaborating and cooperating. And I mean, it's not just, our military participation, it's our tax dollars. It's our, if you got a really good idea, I'll tell you guys, when I was younger, I came up with this really good mathematical concept. Okay. In fact, if you guys get the Book of Power, you'll see I did some mathematics. I did a summation for factorials. Okay, so like 5 factorial, 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. I represented it in a arithmetic summation. Pretty interesting stuff. But when you find out something like this, right, which is useless, obviously, but when you find out something like this, your first thought is, how can I give this to the white man? And so I said, I'm not going to do that. That's why it's in the Book of Power, and that's why I get no credit for it. But the reality is that the position that a lot of us find ourselves in is that we are absolutely contributing to the advancement of white America, day in and day out. When you watch, movies like, I didn't watch it, but when you watch movies like Hidden Figure, you're like, oh yes, this black woman, she's so smart, she did this. You're talking about black people who are able to help white people going to space when black people are not able to go to space. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yes, you are absolutely collaborating, you're absolutely advancing white people, you're absolutely collaborate, whatever, right? And it's to your detriment. And if you're not willing to say, you know what, actually, let me not help this colonial project, that's the reason why I went to astrophysics. I'll tell you guys, the reason why I went to astrophysics, because I said, I realized that almost everything inside the American country was supporting its military-industrial complex. And I said to myself, let me find some field that cannot be weaponized. And then while I was in my, PhD studies, I learned that America, like NASA, big space company, right, was taking photographs of the Congo in order to send soldiers over there to, find out where the minerals were. So as to say that every single part of this American project is operating toward the military-industrial complex. And so, yes, sometimes, like I said, 40 years ago, 80 years ago, you could have said, look, we're here, but we can't leave. Because that's what they say Jamaica stands for. Jamaica, they say it stands for, we're stuck here, right? Absolutely. You can say, I couldn't leave 50 years ago. But today you should try to divest, in the words of that, or you should say, let me leave. Right? And that's it. Toku says astrophysics, satellite communication, information superhighway. Well, what my astrophysics was actually like intergalactic studies. So it was like really stellar dynamics of galaxies. Like it really, really had nothing to do with anything. But at the same time, it was like, but yeah, absolutely. The white, but that's the whole point. That the fact that America is weaponizing everything, and then there are some a lot of African Americans who are really, really pushing the boundaries. Like when you go to college, when you go to grad school, and you write that paper, you are advancing the American project. Now, obviously, I'm not saying don't go to grad school. I'm not saying don't blah blah blah. But what I'm saying is that you have to bear in mind that absolutely, your contribution on this earth is advancing white America, and of course, if you're advancing white America, you're not advancing Black Africa. That's it.
Yeah, that thesis goes into a library. Only on the screen, Trigger Happy 262 asked this question while you were giving your response to it. He says, if this is the argument, then would it be fine to say that Palestinians and Israel are also colonizers within the state of Israel, considering they would have to also pay tax dollars to Israel? And he adds that when I mean Palestinians in Israel, that these are actual Palestinians living in Israel as opposed to the West Bank and Gaza. Well, what say you to that quickly?
Well, again, so that there's a like, again, there is that, like I said, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, if you told me African Americans, again, African Americans were like forced to be here. You get what I'm saying? So it's different if you're forced to be there. So what happened in regards to the Palestinians in Israel, if you will, is that really there's no Israel, obviously. I shouldn't say that because I got neighbors, right? But really they are like it's Palestine, and then Israel were the colonialists. So it's like if I don't know, like let's say if let's say Mexico invaded New York somehow, whatever, right? And then there was a Mexican government. Obviously, if I continued to stay in New York, I would pay to the Mexican government. You know what I mean? Like I'd pay taxes to the American government, the Mexican government. I wouldn't necessarily be the colonizer in that respect because I was already living there. You know what I mean? It's the same with like African Americans in the sense that they were, you know, forcefully brought here. It's only a question of, well, if after all is said and done, if you get your freedom, right, and then you decide, okay, I'm just going to, you know, stay along. I'm just going to play along, and then I'm going to help the, you know, like for instance, if you're a Palestinian and then you start helping Israel develop weapons, and then you start helping Israel, you know, fly into space, and you're not doing anything for the Palestinians, you know, obviously, you know, if I were a Palestinian, I would look at you like, what the fuck are you doing? Like you are, like you've become an Israeli. You know what I'm saying? You know, so I think that's where it comes down to with African Americans to say that, yes, absolutely, you know, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, you could have said, you know, so on and so forth. But at some point, you got to say to yourself, well, if you are advancing the American military industrial complex, if you're creating new weapons for America, if you're doing this, if you're putting all your life, you know, if you're doing all that, you know, you can't necessarily, you know, just say, well, you know, but they're being forced to do it. You know what I mean? Like with the example of the Palestinian in Israel, like again, he's literally in his country, and then there was another settler that came in and went over them. That's not the same as because you can't expect everybody to fight. You get what I'm saying? You can't expect everybody to fight to the death at every 5 seconds, but you can say to yourself, well, what are you doing with your life after you know 10 generations? When are you gonna say, okay, all right, this is not me? You know, when are you going to separate yourself? Is really the question. That's it.
Right. So I'll give because I want to move on to the next topic. I'll give Trigger Happy 262 the last word from the chat. And there's a bunch of comments. I try to put them up on the screen. Shout out to Provide Triggers for Evolution who joined us. Trigger said, I think if the prompt is to stimulate African Americans to make a choice and choose the African world, good. If the prompt is to antagonize African Americans as being uniquely guilty in world crimes, that's just incorrect. Yeah. By now, Trigger Happy, I would say this, that you should know that it's the former and not the latter. It's the former, not the latter. The other comments in the chat, you guys do, if you listen to the playback, check out all the comments in the chat. But for time's sake, let's move on to Shooter Breeze topic number 2. I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. Much thanks to Takru, Tori, Trigger Happy 262 Plus, as well as Provide Triggers for Evolution. Much thanks to you guys for being in the chat, being active. Make sure hit the like button, share the stream to your social media, invite others to join the conversation.
Koku.
Yes,
Koku.
sir.
I don't mean to interject. There's one thing I wanted to add on to what Oni said about the spy satellites on the Congo. Now you do realize that they have something called the Nancy Grace Space Telescope going up. That used to be a spy satellite. They have satellites that are as good as the Hubble Space Satellite, and they're basically spy satellites. If you could turn the Hubble Space Satellite around to Earth, it could be just as good as these spy satellites. That's all I wanted to say. Go ahead.
No problem, man. No problem.